Okay, everyone, welcome to Wars and You. I'm Seluna Cressen, one of the university's fine instructors. Today we'll be talking about the mechanics of war declarations, how they apply to Eve University in our latest war, and the Ivy League, which is our parent alliance. And we'll also be talking about how that changes things during a state of war in high security, low security, and no security space. We'll also be talking about how you can continue your operations mostly unaffected while going about your day-to-day business and not having to worry too much about war targets. So, without further ado, let us begin. So, first, wars themselves. If you're new to the uni, this is probably the first war you've seen. For those of us who have been here for a while, this is something of a regular occurrence. For the last year, I've been in war maybe 90% of the time, 90+% of the time. So a state of peace is actually relatively unusual for E-UNI. So this is, if anything, is a return to normalcy rather than a unusual event. So we've had lots of past wars, and there's nothing particularly crazy or unusual about war. And I hope that that's that much at least is clear. And in the past, here for example is the last real war of any substance we were in. And you'll notice that as a war progresses, one side is killing the other side's ships. And at the end of the war, you've seen how much each side has killed in terms of the total ISK damage and number of ships done. And that's sort of how you measure, in effect, who is winning or who has won a particular war, sort of the overall damage that was dealt or the amount of pain that was inflicted on the other person's ships. The other corporation or alliance's ships. Another way to see how a war is progressing is to go to our kill feed, which I've linked there. And if you go to the kill feed at any moment, under the active campaign section, you'll see the wars that are in progress, if any. In this particular case, the Whores in Space war has not yet started. But if you went to the Whores in Space link there, that will show you how the war is progressing once it has started. Now, again, it's pretty boring right now because we don't have any, the war has not yet started, so there's no kills or no losses. So the main object of war in EVE is generally one of three purposes: profit, harassment, or just fun. E-UNI tends to attract probably the second type of war and the third type of war more often than not, mostly because the crux of the ships that are killed are easy kills, people not paying attention, K-mining, just because the players are newer, that sort of thing. In fact, that most recent war, the German Freak Show versus Ivy League, you can see that but for the fact that they killed about 1 billion ships worth of miners and industrial ships, if you subtract that out, that is, if you subtract all the people who probably weren't paying attention or who were not following wartime protocols, that war would have been won in E-UNI's favor, probably. So if you look at that, they lost about 1 billion worth of industrial ships and probably another, let's say, 500 million worth of capsules. So if you subtract those out, E-UNI or Ivy League comes out ahead. So very important to make sure that you follow instructions, as we'll talk about during this class. Daniel Tungsten asked, how do you make a profit off of a war when it costs so much? In high-sec war decks, you generally are not making a profit. Most of the time you're blowing up stuff that just happens to be very expensive, but you don't get the drops from it or anything. So if you shoot a pod, for instance, you don't get any of the money that it costs to replace that pod. The rarest parts are bounties, but again, like I said, E-UNI doesn't really attract the profit kinds of wars. It really attracts the fun and harassment kind of wars because it's easy to kill unistas who aren't paying attention. So if that's essentially how wars are measured and fought, by how many ships are killed and how much damage is done. The way a war actually starts is that the CEO of a corporation or the head of an alliance declares war against another corporation or alliance. And when that happens, you pay an amount ranging in value from about 50 million to about 500 million, and that starts the war. The war then has a 24-hour waiting period. After the 24-hour waiting period is up, the war begins. So in this case, we're still in the 24-hour waiting period with the Horrors in Space war. And you'll notice that if you went to your mail section and you go to the notifications tab in your email, and then under the war tab on the left, you'll see that Concord sends a notification for each war deck that starts, and it will also send a notification when a war deck expires or when it ends. So in this case, the notification happened at 6:25 on June 20th, so the war will start at 6:25 on June 21st. So just add 24 hours from the time you got the message, and that tells you when the waiting period is up. So that's the process of actually starting the war. A war ends in one of several ways. First, it can end because one of the corporations that was in the war, so for example, if Corporation X war decks, the Ivy League and Eve University left the Ivy League, Eve University's war with Corporation X would end after 24 hours. So a corporation leaving an alliance, that's one way a war can end, although only for that corporation and not for the rest of the alliance. The second way war can end is if the corporation that initiates the war declaration fails to pay their war declaration bill. So as we noted, war decks can get rather expensive. You need a pretty substantial alliance or corporation size or other income stream to support a war declaration. Generally speaking, unless you have a very specific strategy for shooting things, a war declaration is not going to be an ISK positive maneuver for you, unless you're very tactically doing it, for example, to war deck somebody who has a pause at a location that you would like to have it. That would be a good reason for a profit war deck. But in this case, the Horrors in Space war deck is much more the Category 2 and Category 3 fun and harassment. So failure to pay the war deck will cause the war to expire after the 7-day period ends. Otherwise, if you keep paying the bill, it keeps getting extended for another 7 days, and then another 7 days, and another 7 days, and so on. And then the third reason that a war might end is you just decide to end it. Most people don't do that. Usually they just stop paying the bill, and then that ends the war by default. A fourth way is that the corporation who is war decked could surrender to the corporation that initiated the war deck. I haven't seen that happen ever in Eve University. I'm pretty sure that we've never done that. But perhaps someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that in general, that's also not a practice that's done, just because generally speaking, it's not profitable for the aggressor to continue the war deck. In this case, Horrors in Space is a alliance that's large enough to have an income stream that could sustain a war deck indefinitely if they wanted to. Angus Adelwin asks, do war decks even matter outside of high sec? Yes, they do matter. Low sec, for example, war decks do affect who you could engage without a security status penalty. In null sec, war decks are totally irrelevant. Black Razor X asks, does the price keep going up? The price is based on the size of people in your alliance or corporation. So that's the main effector of the price. Susie Borgia asks, do the griefer types like the Horrors ever have the guts to go into low sec? I wouldn't underestimate Horrors in Space. We'll talk a little bit about their alliance specifically later on, but they definitely have many very skilled pilots. Their typical strategy is to bring a bunch of boosted alts into a system. The boosted alts will not be in the same alliance as Horrors in Space, and therefore cannot be aggressed in high sec unless they do something first, which they will never do because they're just boosting alts. They're not meant for direct combat. And occasionally they do venture into low security space, and then usually that is a fatal mistake on their part and they get killed. Doc Pugilist asks, do we have intel on them? Yes, we do have intel on them. You should join we'll cover this later, but you should join the intel.iln mailing list for updates on war targets and a list of things you can do. Okay, so that's the basic war declaration structure. one corporation sends a declaration of war to another corporation or alliance, and a war continues for a week at a time until someone stops paying the bill or it ends. So while a war is in operation, a few different effects happen. First is that all of the members of the opposing corporations or alliances become war targets. War targets are a special status that will show up in your local and will show up in your overview window as a flashing red star in local, and it will show up as a flashy red entry on your overview. So if you see a flashing red star in local, that means that that person is a member of a corporation or alliance that you are currently at war with. So in this case, you would see after 0625 tomorrow, all the members of Horrors in Space will appear as flashy red stars in local. So that means it's very important to have your overview set up correctly. It's also important that your local window be large, or as large as you can make it. So that usually means it occupies a large vertical strip along your screen. So for example, I'll take a quick screenshot of what mine looks like. There we go. So you can see that I've got my local window tall and thin along the very right-hand side of my window, and it takes up the entire vertical space of the right-hand side of my window. You can feel free to arrange it however you like, but the bigger the better, because that means you can see more people in local, which means you can see more potential war targets at a single time. This is particularly useful in busy systems like Aldrat, for example, or HEC, or any of the trade hubs, because there will be a lot of people in those systems, and it will be unlikely that you'll be able to see everyone at once in your local window. So having a tall window is important because it means it's easier to scroll through the list and see if there's a war target in there at any given moment. So as I mentioned, the primary effect of two corporations or alliances being at war with each other is that the two corporations or alliances become engageable targets. That means that there's no security status penalty and no suspect or criminal flags attached to attacking those people. So normally if you were to aggress someone who was not at war with your corporation and who otherwise was just a neutral with respect to you, then you would instantly go criminal in high security space and you would be concorded. Of course, when you're in a war, if it doesn't happen, you don't get a criminal or a suspect flag or a security status hit. All you get is a weapons timer, which is 60 seconds, and that prevents you from jumping through stargates or docking up at stations. And so that means that the mechanics of how you fight in high-sec change dramatically once you're in war, because people that previously would not be able to engage you all of a sudden now can engage you. So that means that you sort of have to increase your caution level when you're operating in a high-security environment. Since Aldrat is in high-security space, we will mostly be talking about how to be safe inside of Aldrat and surrounding. So how many people are familiar with the back pocket of Aldrat? X up if you've heard the phrase back pocket. Okay. How about Y up if you haven't heard the phrase back pocket? Alrighty. So everyone, go take a look at this link. This is a map of the metropolis region with Aldrat pretty much dead at the center there with a nice big circle around it. And the lines radiating away from Aldrat are the systems that Aldrat is connected to. And the number underneath each system there, that is the security status of that system. So for example, Aldrat is a 0.6 system, or is a 0.6 system, Fredegat is a 0.8 system, and so on. Our high security space are yellow. Systems that are low security space are orange or light red. And then systems that are in null security space are deeper red. There are no systems in Metropolis that are null security space. So you can see the lines radiating away from Aldrat. But you'll also notice that all of the systems connected by black lines, that is, all the systems in the same constellation as Aldrat, can only be accessed by going through Aldrat. So, for example, there is no way to leave these systems, Fredegod, Hardbacco, Earnhard, Erster, or Leibold, without going through Aldrat. There's no other way to get to the outside world of Eve without going through Aldrat. So we call those 6 systems, those 5 systems, the back pocket: Fredegod, Hardbacco, Earnhard, Erster, and Leibold. So that means that if a war target were to come into the area via Aldrat, you would always have at least 1 jump's worth of time before they could find you in one of the back pocket systems. That in turn means that if you're monitoring intelligence channels like our liveintel.iln, which I've noted there, if you join that channel, that is our Ivy League Navy intelligence channel, and you'll see there in the message of the day that you can report intel situations and war targets in that channel. So if you stay posted to that channel and people see war targets, they will be posting it in that channel. That means that you'll always have a heads up before war targets arrive if you're doing things like mining, or if you're doing ratting or mission running in the back pocket. So if you happen to see that intelligence arrive and you note that a war target is an Aldrat, you have advance warning about whether or not to dock up, and certainly you're informed about whether they pose a threat to you at that point. So if they come in a shuttle, that's probably less concerning than if they came in, say, a Vigilant or a Nightmare. Next up, you'll notice that the liveintel.iln is one way of getting intelligence. You have to be paying attention to that channel, and if you're doing a lot of things at once, that might be difficult to pay attention to. That's why we always recommend that you be in a fleet whenever you are undocked. So if you're, preferably while you're docked too. The reason for that is that if you get in trouble and there are other people around who would like to help you, it is much easier for them to do that if you are in a fleet with them, because then they can warp to you directly and engage people who might be trying to hurt you. Sarah Eddy asked, how do you report fleets arriving? If you go to the liveintel.iln channel, the message of the day clearly describes how to do that. Eternalist Cusoni asked, when and how will we get the password for that chat? Eternalist, if you don't know how to get chats by now, you should be paying attention to the information you were giving when you joined when you joined the company. Here's a link to the forum thread where that's discussed. You should be going to the Alliance bulletins to get further info on that. Okay, so the war declarations, when they're in effect, again, should cause you to observe an increased level of scrutiny and pay attention to your environment and what's surrounding you. Like we said before, liveintel.iln is one way to get that increased level of scrutiny, so you get the benefit of everyone who's not just in the same region as you, but anybody who might have spotted a war target anywhere in Eve. Next, the next thing you should do again is be in a fleet. We do allow people to be in a fleet all by themselves, but that's not a great idea, because when you're in a fleet all by yourself, there's no way that anybody else could warp to you. They'd have to join your fleet first. So it's much better to join the Operation Fortress Fleet. The Fortress Fleet is a standing fleet that is in effect usually whenever we have a war targets out and about, or whenever we are at war. I don't actually see it up right now if I'm looking at the fleet list, but if you were scrolling through the fleet list and you click Find Fleets, the Operation Fortress Fleet will show up there. You should feel free to join Operation Fortress whenever you see it. It is our standing home defense fleet. I'll link the wiki. Here's our Operation Fortress wiki page for more info on how that works and what you can do when you're in Fortress. It's one of the best ways to stay safe while you're missioning or doing other things that aren't necessarily direct combat or quick response operations. Aiden Sozani asked, within how many systems of Aldrat do you need to be in Operation Fortress? There's no restriction on how close you need to be in Operation Fortress. You can join if you're all the way in the nullsec campus, which is 30 jumps away if you wanted to. The It's just that the purpose of Operation Fortress is more meant for defending things that are close to Aldrat. So it wouldn't really make sense to rally Operation Fortress to go hunt a war target that was, for example, in Dodixie, which is quite a ways away from where Aldrat is. Again, Operation Fortress is for defending Aldrat and the pipe, and maybe down to Hex sometimes, but generally within a few jumps of Aldrat. Aiden Sozani asks, so I can join before I come to Aldrat if you are heading there? Yes, you can definitely do that, and you probably should do that. Okay, so, so next up, once you're in Operation Fortress, which you should be, again, if you're operating or planning to operate in or around Aldrat, you should be in the associated Mumble Fortress. So if you open your Mumble window now, and you... Okay, someone needs to make sure they have their Mumble key set to push to talk. Please make sure you have your Mumble set to push to talk. Otherwise, I will destroy you and everything you love. Okay, so if you scroll down a little bit to the Special Projects and Events section in Mumble, which is directly below this class chat, you'll see that there is a Operation Fortress channel. Whenever the Operation Fortress fleet is up or you're in that fleet, you should be in that channel. Okay. Then finally, if you have questions about just what to do or what's happening, please feel free to ask in Operation Fortress. It's meant to be a place, it's meant to be sort of a de facto mess.iln where you can ask those sorts of questions and get answers about what to do. But it's also meant for the quick response fleet, that's QRF, formation, so that we can go and hunt war targets if they are threatening people. Okay, so any questions on Operation Fortress before we move on? Any other questions on Operation Fortress? So again, just that checklist of be in a fleet, be in Mumble, and the fleet you should probably be in is Operation Fortress, and the Mumble channel you should probably be in is the Operation Fortress Mumble channel. Make sure you have local nice and tall. Make sure that you're watching local actively. Make sure you have liveintel.iln open. Make sure you're watching that to see if there are war targets near you. So all that's just for staying cautious. What happens if you actually spot a war target in system? What should you do? So presupposing that you're doing some kind of PvE activity like missioning or mining or courier packages, etc. Although if you're hauling things, we're going to talk about that later on. If you're doing a PvE activity and you see a war target come into system, you should probably immediately dock up. If that's not possible, for example, because you're, if you're doing something that would preclude you from docking up right away, like you have some kind of session timer that's waiting, or you have a weapons timer because you've just been PvPing with someone, if those sorts of things are true, then you should align to a celestial. So go to your pod saver tab, which you should have set up if you have done your overview correctly. Go pick a random celestial there, align to it, and then stay aligned. If the situation that prevents you from docking up has expired, then you can go ahead and safely dock up. If you want to continue operations and you're not worried about the particular ship you're in, so if you're in something extremely cheap like a frigate and you're in a pod that doesn't really matter because it's super cheap or has nothing implanted and you want to continue operations, then I recommend you take extra caution because war targets will be trying to find people who are still out in space. And if you're out in space, that means they can't get you. So staying out in space with a war target in system is an implicit invitation to be shot at, since again you are in high sec, and if you're in a PvE ship, that probably means you're not well suited for direct combat with another ship. So what should you do if the war target that was previously just in system now comes on the same grid as you? Presuming that he hasn't warped directly within warp scramble range, which is about 20 kilometers, you should immediately get out of there. So this is the point where if you're staying aligned to something, you can just warp off instantly and they won't even have time to finish locking you if you're aligned, because you'll see them show up on your overview and land on grid, and then they'll have about 3 to 5 seconds before they can start moving and before their warp finishes. That will give you plenty of time to initiate your own warp and get out of there, and they won't ever have caught you. At that point, you should, if you didn't warp to a station, if you warp to some celestial, they'll probably notice what celestial you warped to, and at that point, you should either leave the system or go dock up. So you may be wondering, well, let's say I'm at some particular spot that's difficult to warp to, like say a mission spot, or perhaps you've scanned down a combat site and you're running that and you're doing exploration, or maybe you're at a data or relic site doing hacking mini games or things like that. So it might be difficult for the war targets to get you, even if they. You might think that it would be difficult for them to get you because they'd first have to scan you down, right? Wrong. What's probably happened is that they've already scanned down the system that you're in using an alt or somebody who is not a war target. Remember, anybody can scan down anything at any time. It doesn't have to be a war target who's doing it. And then they can bookmark the sites that you're already at and warp their war targets who are in the same fleet as them but in a different alliance, and then they can come and shoot you. So if you find somebody in system with you who is not a E-UNI and it's a small system, you should be immediately skeptical. You should probably take a look at their standings and see if they're set -5 or -10. If they are set -5 or -10 to the E-UNI, you should consider them as good as if they were war targets, because they may as well be aiding the war targets to begin with. So again, alts are used to great effect in war declarations in HiSec because the alts are not aggressible, since the alts are not falling under the other corporation's war declaration. If you see combat probes out on your D-scan, that means that you are probably being probed, or at least someone in the system is being probed. Combat probes enable another ship to warp directly to you once you are fully scanned down. And with the new changes that were made in Odyssey, it is much, much easier to probe down ships. So this will be the first war we've seen post-Odyssey that lets people do that. And actually, that's not true. I guess German Freak Show was post-Odyssey too. But with the new probe scanning system, it's much, much easier to probe people down, and you should be threatened by that. Okay, so D-scanning. Please X up if you've never used D-scan before. Okay, no worries. All you're going to do, I'll show you the easiest and least skill-intensive way to use D-scan. First, you're going to make sure that you're on your PvP tab. That is, again, your PvP tab. So this will only work if you're out in space. So you may want to briefly undock if you're not in a dangerous situation to try this out. So maybe undock and hug the station you're at or something like that. And you can go to the button that's the third from the top on the left of your heads-up display. So if you mouse over it, it will say Scanner. The default shortcut for your scanner window is Alt-D as in dog. If you click the scanner button, it will open a radial menu, and the radial menu has 4 components from clockwise from the top. They are Show Sensor Overlay, Directional Scan, Moon Analysis, and Probe Scanner. We're most interested in the Directional Scan one, so go ahead and click the right-hand sector of the radial menu. That will bring up your Directional Scan tab in the scanner window. You'll see a few things of interest here. First, you'll see the range box and the angle slider and a scan button. When you click scan, the scanner will look at the range you have set and the angle you have set, and it will show everything that can be scanned down that matches something that would show up in your overview. So for example, if your overview is configured to show, let's say, stargates and ships, then what will show up in your D-scan are stargates and ships. If your overview is configured to show asteroids, then what will show up in your D-scan is asteroids. If your overview is configured to show planets, then what will show up in your D-scan will be planets. So notice that if you are looking for ships, but your overview is configured to show asteroids, then you won't be seeing any ships on your D-scan. So make sure that you have a tab when D-scanning that is configured to show ships if you are trying to look for ships. So that means that we can use the D-scan to determine if there are things within a reasonable range that are of threats to us. The default range in your D-scan is about 14 AU. So if you look in the distance section of your overview window, you'll see that things are measured in different distances. Once something gets about 1 million kilometers away from you, Eve switches the unit of representation to AU instead of meters or kilometers. So the 2.1 billion kilometers there, if that's about 14 AU. If you want to try a different range, if you want to look for things that are within closer range, you can do that too. But we recommend you leave it on 14 AU unless you know what you're doing. So if you go ahead and click scan, and again, make sure your angle is set all the way to the 360, the farthest right-hand slider there, and you click scan, that will show you all the things that are within the 14 AU range or whatever's in your range box that match something on your overview and which can be descanned. So note that very important and which can be descanned clause, because if something is, for instance, cloaked or is not within descan range, then it will not show up in your overview. That means that if you have, let's say, gates that are more than 14 AU away from wherever you currently are, you won't be picking up new ships coming into the system that way. You won't be able to see a new ship show up on your descan because it won't be within descan range. You can, after you click scan, that's just a static list. It does not update. So you need to, if you want to get a new scan, you have to click the scan button again. So this results in a rather tedious process of clicking scan in paranoia every 5 seconds once you see a war target enter the system, or when you see somebody who's an obvious alt entering the system, or when you see somebody who even might be an alt entering the system. So repeatedly mashing scan once you see things that may be a possible threat to you is an excellent habit to get into, especially if you ever plan to live in wormhole space where it's pretty much second nature to do that. Okay, so the descan trick combined with watching local, combined with live intel.iln, combined with the intel.iln mailing list, combined with the Operation Fortress fleet, combined with the Operation Fortress mumble, should give you ample warning of any war targets operating in and around you. But let's say you forgot all of that and you weren't paying attention, and all of a sudden now there's a war target arriving on grid with you. What should you do? First and most important thing to do, assuming you don't want to engage them, is to go to your pod saver tab and pick a random celestial and warp to that celestial. Then immediately once you've landed at the celestial, try to find a station in system and immediately dock up. Assuming that this is in high security space, there will be no way that they can prevent you from docking up if you don't shoot them first. So you will be instantly safe in any system that has a station in it if you can warp directly to the station. This is a different case in low security space or null security space, but again, with Horizon space, we are probably facing a mostly, if not completely, high security space war. If you happen to be in a system that is farther from Aldrat, so for example, maybe you're doing some out-of-the-way missioning, or you're going to incursions, etc., and you happen to be all by yourself, and you're not really in a actively trafficked part of the EVE universe where Unistas are, then you should be aware that liveintel.iln is not going to save you, because since there are few people around you, there are fewer people to report war targets. Liveintel.iln is best if you're traveling down the Aldrat to Heck pipe, or if you're operating near a trade hub. Even then, I don't know if I would you should not trust the lack of liveintel.iln as a indication that it is safe to travel currently. Okay. Let's say that the war has been going on for some time, and maybe you've gotten a few ships blown up, or maybe you have some planetary interactions that need tending to, and you'd really like to get out something slow and big so that you can haul things around. What should you do? If you answered undock with your EVE University character, wrong. Go back to square one. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Instead, you should be making a alt hauler. You should have an alternate account, an alternate character, I should say, either on the same account or on a different account that has been trained in one of the industrial skills, and using that character to move things around rather than your main character. Okay, so again, if you're in a out-of-the-way area, liveintel.iln will not save you. Make sure that you are using your situational awareness, fleet mates, etc. to keep on top of the situation. Do not rely on liveintel.iln to save you. Alice Haley asked, say you find a possible target, but it's on 360 angle. How do you narrow the field to get a better intel? That is a topic for a DScan class. I don't think that we want to get into the specifics of how to do a complete DScan. But there was a DScan class earlier today, which I advise you to take a look at the recording of. Okay, let's move on. So we've covered how war declarations work. We've covered what to do in the situation where you are PvEing and a war declaration is active. We've covered what to do if somebody lands on grid with you. We've covered how to be cautious and increase your alertness during wartime. Now let's talk about what happens if we actually want to engage targets that may be in or around your area. First of all, you're going to want to assume that the people who are fighting you are not complete idiots and they do know what they're doing. If you're a new UNISTA, that probably means that just by virtue of statistics, they probably have more experience in the game than you. And I mean experience both in the sense of time and wisdom in playing EVE, as well as actual number of skill points. So having taken that into account should be your first priority. So if they're doing something that looks like it's a stupid mistake, for instance, if they appear to be sitting AFK in space, you should question whether they actually are sitting AFK in space. So it's not to say it never happens, but just keep that in mind. But on the flip side, occasionally things like this do happen. This is a EVE University kill from a war with the Space Police last year. This is a 3 billion pod loss, so make sure that this doesn't happen to you. Sometimes you'll notice, by the way, that this was in low security space in Hagular. So people are silly sometimes and do make mistakes. But that said, it's not, you should not assume that someone is making a mistake. Assume they know what they're doing. So evaluate it in that context. Next thing to look at is whether or not there are people who are not in EVE University in the same system. Those people could be boosting alts. Boosting alts are people sitting in ships that provide bonuses to other ships that are in the same fleet. Just like if you were in a fleet, your fleet commander, wing commander, or squad commander can pass bonuses to you. These people are flying in particular ships with other whores in space or other war deck people in the same fleet, and they are providing bonuses far in excess of the normal fleet wing and squad command bonuses, because they are flying ships specifically fitted out and bonus for that. Normally, flying a ship like that in low sec or no sec would be pretty much a death sentence if you were aggressed, because those ships are not very tanky and are giving up a lot of their firepower and defenses so that they can fit more boosting modules. But since this is high security space, and since they can't be aggressed because they are not part of the war deck, they are able to provide those bonuses without being retaliated against. So that in turn means that if that's a situation that happens to you, if you don't want that situation to happen to you, where you think you're engaging, say, one target, but you're actually engaging one target that's heavily boosted by 3 other people providing very, very large amounts of boosts. So consider that if you're, say, fighting a cruiser versus cruiser, you may not be fighting cruiser versus cruiser. You may be fighting cruiser versus another cruiser that has 50% bonuses to tracking speed, damage, velocity, etc., etc. Generally speaking, you're not going to catch war targets individually. or I should say you're less likely to catch war targets individually moving through high sec. They will probably be more likely to be moving through fleets because most of the Horizon Space people do not operate exclusively in high sec. There are a few that do, but most of them don't. We'll go through the members of their alliance in a little bit. But so generally speaking, if you see because they're part of a larger fleet, although it's not necessarily so, but it's probably true that that's what's happening. So you just see one or two people that they're engageable. Having said all that, if you are part of Operation Fortress and maybe there's some war targets in Aldrat or nearby, and it looks like the pipe is clear and there's nobody within 2 or 3 jumps that could really assist them, and there don't seem to be boosting alts around, then maybe it's time to form up Operation Fortress and go lead a quick response fleet, or QRF. A QRF works by putting Operation Fortress into essentially combat mode, and usually what will happen is that one of the wings or squads of Operation Fortress will be named something like PvP or QRF or something like that. If you want to join the QRF fleet and hunt war targets, you would be joining that particular wing or squadron of the fleet. And you'll listen closely to comms. You will need a fleet commander or an FC to be conducting the QRF operation. If you'd like to step up and lead it yourself, that's actually a great way to learn how to do it. But just make sure you're willing to take on the responsibility of all the other fleet command things. Go ahead and ask in mess.iln if that seems like something you're interested in, and people can talk to you about how to get started with that. But assuming you have a fleet commander to lead the QRF operation, you would then pay attention to that person leading the QRF as if it were any other fleet like Noobs on Patrol or just something that would be forming up an alliance. It's just like a mini fleet that's happening within Operation Fortress going to hunt war targets, and you should treat communications in the Fortress mumble as if they were combat comms at that point. And at that point you'll be going to hunt war targets, and just pay attention to your FC and what they're asking you to do. Aiden Sozani asked, does the E-UNI ever use boosting alts? Yes, sure, all the time. Alts are slightly less common, but we definitely do have boosters who are in the E-UNI. But yes, certainly we take advantage of boosting alts like anybody else would. It's just that Horizon Space is particularly notorious for not going anywhere without having boosting alts. So when I'm making a special point of it, I mean to make it in that respect, that they probably always have boosting alts, and if you don't see, unless you literally do not see anybody else in the system who's not an E-UNI, there's probably a chance that one of those people is a boosting alt. Okay, so we covered how Operation Fortress works from the PvE perspective, so it's meant to defend against situations in and around Aldrat, and from the PvP perspective, where it's meant to go hunt other people who are war targets in and around Aldrat. What happens if you need to travel from A to B and you'd like to do so safely, and you're not hauling anything, so you're not going to be using your alt hauler, you just want to be, I forgot to link that, by the way. This is our wiki guide. So if you need to make an alt that can haul things for you, please use that wiki guide to get started. Training an alt that can haul things takes less than 1 day of training time, so it's really not a skill point intensive endeavor. And after that, you can haul all your stuff completely safely without ever worrying about war targets. So let's say you need to travel from A to B. How do you do that safely? Well, first things first, you probably don't want to be flying expensive things if you're just traveling around. You probably want to be flying a ship that's been refitted for travel. Refit for travel means that you want to replace your low slots with things that make it harder to warp scramble you and make it easier for you to change direction. So you'll probably want to add things like a warp scrambler 1, or a warp core stabilizer. So if whoever my linker was, could you please link the warp core stabilizer? And please also link the nanofiber internal structure. Thank you, Kato. So you can see that the warp core stabilizer, if you go to the attributes tab, you'll notice that one of the attributes it provides is that it reduces the effective scrambling strength of scramble modules applied to your ship by 1. So that means it takes 1 additional point of warp scramble on you to prevent you from warping. So this would neutralize a single warp disruptor and would not save you from a warp scrambler, since that applies 2 points of warp scramble strength. The nanofiber internal structures are useful because they reduce your inertia modifier. Reducing your inertia modifier means that it's easier for your ship to change direction and turn. That's very easy. That's very useful for example, when you jump through a gate, you will not necessarily be aligned to the next thing you want to warp to. So if you jump into a gate camp, it behooves you to be able to warp towards the thing you want to go to next as quickly as possible, and that means reducing your align time. The inertial stabilizers also do give you better inertia, but they come at the cost of a signature radius bonus, which makes it easier to lock you. So those are slightly less advisable depending on what kind of ship you're in. So generally speaking, nanofiber internal structures are only very slightly less effective than inertial stabilizers, and they don't come with the penalty of the signature radius increase. So they make it easier for you to get out of there without making it easier for you to be locked up. So let's assume you have jumped into that situation I just described for. You've jumped into a gate camp while traveling. What should you do? Well, the first thing you should not do is panic. You have a full 60 seconds of gate cloak before you will decloak. So if you do nothing, you will have 60 seconds to think about your situation. Maybe, for example, the war targets have just arrived at that gate and are just about to jump through or just leaving themselves, and they haven't even noticed that you've entered the system. So it's worth it to wait at least maybe 15 or 20 seconds to see if that's what's happening. Assuming that's not happening, assuming they've established an active gate camp, the next step is to figure out what kind of ship you're in. If you're, let's say, in a frigate, then you have a micro warp drive on your ship, you will probably be just fine. The first thing you should do is burn right back to the gate and warp through the gate and go to someplace else. So if, for example, the ship I'm in right now, this ship goes about 4,600 meters per second without being overheated, and it takes me less than 3 seconds to get to a gate after I've warped to one. So this is pretty much uncatchable in any gate camp. Just burn back to the gate, switch your micro warp drive on, jump through. So having a ship, if you think you're in the kind of ship that is unlikely to be caught by a gate camp by virtue of either its small size or by virtue of your own speed, then feel free to burn back to the gate and jump right through. If that's probably not happening, so if you can't tank all the damage that you'd probably take burning all the way back to the gate, then you should evaluate whether there's a celestial that's very closely aligned to where you already are. So zoom in on your cloaked ship at that point and see if by moving the camera around you can find a celestial that's more or less in the same direction that your ship is pointed in. Then you should warp to that celestial because your align time will be much lower than if you were to warp in something that's completely the opposite direction from you. So you'd want to make sure you pick something that's within a relatively close angle of whatever direction your ship is currently pointed in. And then hopefully you'll be able to warp off. If neither of those two situations are amenable, then you have a couple of options. First, try looking and taking stock of whatever your active defense mods are. So those would be things like adaptive and vulnerability field 2s, armor hardeners, etc., etc. And for any of the modules that can be overheated, do overheat them. So you have the thermodynamic skill and you can overheat those modules. As soon as you uncloak, overheat all of your defensive modules and start warping out of there. Or alternatively, warp back to the gate with all of your defense mods overheated. As soon as anybody aggresses you, they have prevented themselves from jumping back through the gate for another 60 seconds. So as long as they have their weapons timers active, they won't be able to follow and engage you. In fact, sometimes it may even be worth it. If you're in a particularly slow but tanky ship, it may even be worth it to linger on the gate for a second or two if they haven't managed to shoot you yet. It may even be worth it to linger on the gate for 1 second so somebody gets one hit in. I wouldn't recommend that unless you really know what you're doing, but that is a tactic that can be employed to your advantage. Okay, let's see some questions here. Angus asks, if you are aggressed but do not aggress, does the counter apply to you as well? No. You will get a limited engagement. Actually, I'm sorry, you will not get a limited engagement with war targets. You'll just get a combat timer, a log-off timer, rather. So that means if you log off while you have that timer, your ship will not disappear from space in the way it normally does, which means that you can be probed down and killed for 15 minutes. We see some other people had questions. Oh, yes. Somebody said warp core stabilizers. Angus Adoin asked, warp core stabilizers have major drawbacks in targeting range and scan resolution. Should we fit modules to counter that? I don't really understand what you mean by that. We're only talking about a traveling situation here. So if you're talking about countering it so that you remain effective in combat, that is absolutely not what you should be using warp core stabilizers for. Those are only for making it harder to catch you while traveling. So Whiteold Grits linked a Condor fit here. Let's see this. Yeah, okay. Yep. Note that in a gate camp situation, it's better to have more nanofibers than it is to have more warp core stabilizers, because it only takes 1 or 2 points on you before the warp core stabilizers are useless, because as soon as they overcome your warp core stabilizers, they have effectively not been useful to you at all. And in that case, it would have been better in hindsight to have more inertial stable nanofiber internal structures, because they help you align faster and get out of that situation to begin with. Thomas 8619 Mulgator asked, when I'm cloaked via gate cloak or otherwise, am I safe from being attacked? No, you're not necessarily safe. People can be flying around. If somebody gets within 2,000 meters of your ship, they will decloak you while you have even if you previously had a gate cloak. So, Jim Electron says smart bombs. No, smart bombs do not cause you to decloak. They damage your ship, but they don't cause you to decloak. You'll probably want to decloak so that you can move away and get out of the range of the smart bombs, or at least get back to the gate, but that will not cause you to decloak. It will certainly cause you to decloak if your ship blows up and you go to a pod. That will cause you to decloak, but your ship will just get damaged. You won't decloak. Let's see. Oh yeah, and then otherwise, am I safe from being attacked? As long as you are actually cloaked, yes, you cannot be attacked. You can be attacked by area of effect things like smart bombs, but you can't actually be targeted. Okay, so we've covered so far the sort of basics of staying safe and being cautious and how to deal with situations that might arise if you happen to get into a situation where you're faced with war targets. Now let's talk about the sort of market end of this. So wars don't have to be giant time and money sinks where you stay docked all the time. I hope that we prove that, at least by just showing how you can be a little bit more cautious and avoid most of the dangerous situations that you might be in. But that's more from the time things. That stops you from being undocked. How can you actually be profitable during a war? So a few things. First is that if war targets are hanging around trade hubs, for instance, that probably means that that's where they're going to buy all of the things that they use to blow other people up. That in turn means that there's likely to be increased demand for whatever ships happen to be in the area. And if you take a look at the Horizon Space Alliance, which I'll link in a second, so take a look at the Horizon Space Alliance, you'll see that they have quite a number of different people in their alliance. And now, granted, some of those corporations are much larger than the other. For example, Templar is only 27 people. And likewise, Let Us Sleep is only 13 people. So some of them are very small corporations, but the larger ones are, do have a couple of hundred folks in them and things like that. There's quite a few small corporations in Horizon Space, but all told, I think there are about 400 people. So that's quite a number of people flying a number of really expensive things that occasionally get blown up and need to be replaced. And guess what? Where do they go to buy those things that need to be replaced? They probably go to the nearest trade hub. They're probably not going to go to Aldrat, so I wouldn't really recommend selling there, but they probably are going to go to Heck and that. So it behooves you to watch the market and see what kinds of things seem to be getting bought out more frequently than average. One way to do that is to go look at your market tab. So everyone please open your market tab. And let's take a look at damage control 2s, let's say. So damage control 2s are not really a great, we're just going to use this for reference. This is not a good thing to get for markets because there's so many of them and there's lots of competition in their manufacturing, and the people who buy them in bulk are going to outcompete you. But let's just use this as an example so that you can see what's going on. If you go to the price history tab, you will see the data for the particular region that you're in. This price history chart is only for your region. It's not for all of Eve, so it's whatever region you happen to be in. So currently I happen to be in Syndicate, which is nullsec and has pretty low market activity. So my regional graph looks like this. So you see my regional graph says the price is about 1 million ISK, and the volume today is close to 0. The volume yesterday was close to 0. And then the volume before that is that somebody bought about 40 of them. If we take a look at Eve Central, I'll give you the link there. Oops, I messed that link up. Use that second link. So if you take a look at the Eve Central link, the second one, not the first one, which I mangled, and we look at the JITA sell orders, you'll see that they're selling for about 700 in JITA and about, looks like about 740 in RENs, and it looks like they're selling for about 850 in HEC. So that would be one way to do easy arbitrage would be to buy them in JITA and sell them in HEC. If that was, again, this is not a great module to do that with just because there's so much competition for an obvious module like Damage Control 2. The subject of which modules and which things to sell is really for a different class, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention and note that there are lots of ways to be profitable during wartime, one of which is selling to the war targets that are getting blown up, or even to fellow unistas that are getting blown up. So it's very, this is not an opportunity that you should let pass you by. Take a look at the notes here. So let's just summarize briefly. Staying safe. PvE should be happening in the back pocket. If you're operating in and around Aldrat, do not PvE in Aldrat because you expose yourself to war targets directly and you don't get the benefit of having that one jump alert time. Again, even in the back pocket, it's still not safe because people can log off and log back on while they're in the back pocket. So in that case, you won't get the benefit, but in most cases you will. So try to PvE in the back pocket. Next, make sure you have live intel open. Make sure you have local nice and tall so that it takes up as much of your screen vertically as possible. Make sure you're in Operation Fortress if you plan to be in and around Aldrat. Make sure you're in the Operation Fortress Mumble if you're in Operation Fortress. Next, if you're away from Aldrat, make sure that you're staying cautious and alert of what's around you, especially what's in local. If you're operating in a remote system, it'll be easier to spot war targets, and guess what? If you're the only other person in the system, they probably will have noticed you too, so that's probably a good time to get out of there or dock up or find an alternate route home. If you think a war target can't find you, you're probably wrong. Any player can find almost any other player that's cloaked or that's uncloaked, so assuming that you're not cloaked, you are able to be found. If you need to move things or travel, do that in the appropriate way. Make a travel fit, get those warp core stabilizers and nanofibers on, or if you're moving things around other than a ship that only you can fly versus your alt hauler, then that's a great time to fit those modules. if you're moving things around that don't require the skills to fly, you're just moving minerals or modules or whatever, then use your alt hauler for that. In that case, you should be more or less totally safe unless you're doing something very silly like hauling billions worth of stuff in a T1 industrial ship, which you shouldn't do for general reasons, not just during wartime. Do not try to engage war targets while you're in a travel fit. That's just going to be bad news for you. You should just be trying to escape in travel fits, not trying to engage. And if you get into a QRF, please make sure you listen to who the fleet commander is and pay attention to their orders. Should probably have been on at least a couple of fleets before you decide to join a QRF, just because there will be some fleet commands you may not be familiar with unless and until you've encountered those before. And we do like to have nice statistics on our wars, and we don't want to give them easy kills. And it would be bad news if we gave them a kill because you didn't understand what an order was and then you got blown up or something like that. So avoid giving the war targets easy kills. And then finally, market PvP is the best kind of PvP and is a great way to make additional money if you are interested in hurting the war targets in more than one way. Okay, so that covers the main portion of the class. I want to jump into Q&A at this point. So we're going to open up Mumble. So if you have now an okay time to unmute yourself if you would like, or you can put a X in the class.E-UNI channel to indicate you have a question. And we'll try to get to your questions one at a time. Let me just scroll up briefly to see if I missed anything quick here. Doesn't look like any unanswered questions were recently asked. So Apath Garish has a question. Go ahead, Apath.
Hello, this isn't a question, but something I'd like to advertise that's very relevant to the class. I've just bought 50 Celestises and 50 Blackbirds, all Tech 1 fit, super basic fit, and they will be going up on contracts in Aldrat as soon as Red Folk deliver them, so that should be sometime tomorrow. That means that every single one of you, in the space of about 10 minutes at the very most, can skill into one of these ships and start bringing pain to the war targets. E-UNI has a very strong tradition of making war targets hate their own lives for decking E-UNI, and that is done by hitting them with lots and lots of E-War. Also, I'm planning on FCing a bunch of defense fleets, so I look forward to seeing you guys against the nasty, smelly war targets.
Yay. And Celestises combined with Blackbirds are just horrible, but even one kind of those against a fleet is going to be bad news. So yeah, definitely learn how to fly their ships if you can.
So just as a small reminder, the two skills you need for the Celestis and then for the Blackbird, one is E-War and then the other is sensor linking.
But the Celestis itself and the Blackbirds themselves are cruisers, so you'll first need the cruiser skills to level 1 for that race. So Celestis is a Galente cruiser and the Blackbird is the Caldari cruiser. So you need those two. To actually use the modules, you'll need obviously it will be different. Let me make sure I got the right names
here. Tech 1 fit them all. So it should just be electronic warfare, which is an electronic skill to maybe 2 or 3.
Right, and then you'll also want, don't you need, sensor linking?
Yeah.
So you need sensor linking for the sensor dampeners and
electronic warfare.
Is electronic warfare also that's right, yeah, it's also the jammers, right? Yeah, so sensor linking and electronic warfare.
Yeah, also just make sure up the 2 E-War skills.
Yeah, also get long distance jamming and signature analysis, both excellent support skills for E-War. But you don't need those. Angus Edelwin asked, would it be better for a new player to focus on E-War or tackling right now? I'd like to see the pendulum swing the other way to E-War. I feel like we have a lot of people telling people to do tackling initially. There's nothing wrong with doing tackle. I actually think it's not as it's a more involved discipline than simply, burning towards somebody and hitting F1 to activate your warp scramble or whatever. That's not, I think that takes a little bit more skill than that. So there's a lot of great things you can do with E-War, as Apotheos just pointed out. Yes, Apotheos, please go ahead.
One of the great things about both tackling and E-War is that the ships I've put on contract and then tackle ships, both of them you can skill into in a few hours. So my advice would be do both. Be a tackle for one fleet, be E-War for the next. Do tackle for the next fleet, E-War for the fleet after that. Pick which one you like the most, and then keep putting your skill points into that thing.
Great advice. E-War and tackle is super low skill. I just checked it through my skill plan here. It take about 4 days to get to level 4 skills for everything that you would need to be to fly those more effectively with the support skills. So 4 days to be a great tackler or a great E-War person, and you're just missing the last 5% is a off. Okay, next questions. Please feel free to just type your questions out and mumble, or just start saying them after you hit the X. Eternalist Kusoni, go ahead.
I just had a quick question about the reason why they did a war deck. Is it just cause, or is it going to be something like the whole thing test alliance?
Horse in Space is not part of a larger coalition or anything, but as I said before, there's pretty much 3 main reasons to do wars: for profit, for fun, and for harassment. This is definitely much more of a Category 2, Category 3 war than it is a Category 1 war. Horse in Space is pretty much an alliance about war decking other people. So there isn't a specific purpose. It's more, lots of things in EVE are just because I can, and this is one of those things.
Okay, and how long are we expecting to be in war with them? Is there like an average, or?
No.
The last time we were at war with them, it lasted for about 4 months.
And then the time before that was another 6 months.
But yeah, and wartime has been common to E-UNI since the beginning of last year.
Yep.
That's understandable. In the middle of wartime, especially if it gets thick, when we log on, are we going to be instantly in fleets that we need to report to people, or how do we do that?
It's not that you'd be necessarily reporting to people. Again, as we covered before, the reason you want to be in a fleet, and probably the fleet you want to be in, is Operation Fortress. Or if you're part of a campus, you probably want to be with the associated campus fleet. So if you're in the LSC, you probably want to be in the LSC fleet. If you're in the NSC, you probably want to be in the NSC fleet, etc., etc. But if you're in and around Altrat and you're part of the main campus, then you probably want to be in Operation Fortress. And the reason is not so that you can report to anyone, but so that you can be defended if that's happening, and people can warp to you directly if you're in a fleet. They cannot do that if you're not in a fleet. So if you need help and the QRF is able to be dispatched to help you, that's not going to be able to happen if you're not in a fleet with them. So they won't know who to warp to or how to communicate with you. So that's the main reason you want to be in a fleet. Also, it's just nice to have other people to talk to while semi-combat situations are going on.
Okay, because the only reason why I asked about that is because I'm kind of a long distance away, good 20 to 30 jumps away from Aldrat.
That's fine. It's perfectly fine to join Operation Fortress no matter where you are. There's no range limitation on when you're allowed to join Operation Fortress. It's just that Operation Fortress is probably not going to be dispatched to help you if you're 30 jumps away. That's all. By the way, while we're going through questions, I've linked the forum post there. So if you don't have any questions and you think you're done with the class, then please feel free to leave me a message about how you think the class went. Advice that you thought was useful, advice you didn't think was useful, things you'd like to hear more of, things you'd like to hear less of, etc., etc. Okay, let's keep going with the questions. Could be about this, could be about wars in general, could be about anything you want. Let me hear your questions. Questions, comments, going once. Surely I cannot have answered all possible questions in the 66 minutes we had of classes.
Thank you for running the class, Seluna. You're awesome.
Yes, that's true.
Let me just scroll up to make sure I didn't miss any of the questions here.
I have a question. It seems last time was Wardict Eve University. It lasted for about 3 months. Are we expecting the same again?
I can't say what we're expecting, mostly because I am not Horizon Space and I can't tell you what they expect. But I will say that you should operate. I think it is not an unhealthy mentality to operate as if you were at war all the time, because that gives you a level of caution that will serve you very well after you leave Eve University. So I'll just say that. That said, with respect to the length of time I actually expect it to last, I would say you should probably expect it to last at least a few months. It may be a week, it may be a few months, it may be anywhere in between. It really depends, and it's hard to predict because Horizon Space is not a predictable entity, just like Eve University is not a particularly predictable entity.
Bah. God, never mind.
Smooth.
Christ.
How come we don't attack their bases?
They don't have a single base. Horizon Space is many separate corporations. Eve University is one corporation and an alliance that is pretty much mostly Eve University.
It's not like they have nullsec or sod null where we can go bash their station. Most of them operate at NPC stations, and even so, they don't even have a particular place they dock up. They're nomadic.
We could go to Sod Null, though.
I mean,
Hint.
One thing I have noticed, though, in the past, Pothney can attest to this, that they get very, very frustrated when when we use a lot of ECM and E-War and whatnot. So it's not necessarily how long they're going to work at Deckless, it's how bad we can make them QQ.
Yep.
One of the main ways that people win wars, including Sovnol warfare, is making the opponent hate themselves. Traditionally, the CFC, which is the Goons Coalition, every single war they've won is by denying the enemy fights, and whenever they do fight, just ruining the opposing guy's day by jamming them out or just making it so that they can't fly their ships.
Yep.
This is exactly what we want to do to the kind of lowlifes that think that farming easy kills from Eve-Uni is a good idea.
I have a quick question about security in channels. Like, what channels are a little bit more secure and less secure for communication?
No channels are secure.
No channel is secure. Assume that there are spies. There's probably a spy in this channel right now, but assume that no channel is secure. The closest thing that there is to a secure channel is a direct conversation with someone else, and even that, I don't know if I would trust that.
Historically, whenever we fought UMAD, they'd have people in Op Fortress Mumble relaying exactly what we're saying, and they'd be responding to it in local. I, for example, have as part of my signature on my main character a quote from Soldier Rich Populus, who was a UMAD guy, saying how bad my FCing skills were when I was in the middle of FCing the defense fleet.
Soldier Populus? Give me a break.
I love that guy.
He's the biggest QQ of them all, man.
Yeah, he's got some pretty redeeming qualities, wouldn't you say, Atlas?
Oh, I'd say so, but I think Jimmy 15 must have taken the cake.
I see what you did there, Proth.
I don't know, Mulehauler.
Oh, never mind.
Mulehauler and his oversized ego.
Touche, sir. Good touche.
Oh my god, I've done 2 now.
You know what? I'm going to say this in class.E-UNI. Spies.
Hey guys, did I hear you say there's an Operation Fortress in-game chat channel?
It's not a chat channel, it's a fleet, but I don't think it's up right now.
We're defenseless!
There was a big
peace.
server crash.
Yeah, the Operation Fortress, once it's up, it's going to be in the Fleet Finder, and, it's a fleet channel, so you can use fleet channel for chatting once it's up, but it's not up right now.
Okay, gotcha.
Do we have a specific fitting for a Blackbird?
The ones I've put up on contracts, or rather will be putting up tomorrow once they arrive, they will be very, very basic Tech 1 fit, but they will do the job. You can alter those as per your whims, but they will do the job.
So you're going to have them fitted already?
Yes.
Oh, I canceled, Give it up, Hofty. Would you stop trying to hear your own voice for a second? re-invite me on the conversation. Sorry about that, guys. All right, go ahead, Apathy.
Yeah. All you have to do is go to the contracts page, click accept on the Blackbird, and you'll have a fully fit Blackbird in your hangar. I'm currently got a guide on the forum that's doing that, although I can't put a screen and image on the actual contract section itself because I haven't put any up on contract yet, so I can't make it look like what it is, but there is a thread in the combat lounge that will explain all of that good stuff. I mean, obviously you can still buy your own ships off the market, but this is just an easy way to just have a ship immediately.
Remember that part where I talked about market PvP and profiting off Unistas? Hint, hint.
Hey, I'm doing no markup.
I'm kidding. I
do all my markup for Waffle Guys. It's great. They're so lazy, I can make so much money off them.
Apathy, I'm taking them out for free, so suck it.
You're putting Blackbirds up for free?
Yep.
See, I'm not a null bear. I can't afford to do that.
Okay.
This is speaking of Soul Twitch Populous, this is my favorite Soul Twitch Populous skill. Again, yeah, that was fun. Again, please leave a comment on the forum thread so that I can improve this class in the future and so that future Unistas get the benefit of the improved version of this class. Alright, other questions, comments?
Seluna, I really think there should be a reoccurring thing as well. Not necessarily people enter the uni inside and outside of wars, and you'll just say if we get a refresher, do's and don'ts and whatnot, and then I think it'll be more beneficial overall in the long run.
Sure.
Yeah, you did a good class, man.
There's a question about E-War frigates by Sincere. Basically, E-War frigates, Tech 1 frigates on the hangar, you can just get them for free. If you have hangar access, if not, you can ask in corp chat, and anyone who's hangar access can give them out to you. That's Tech 1 frigates and Tech 1 fittings as well.
Excellent. I had to drop out of the class.E-UNI channel for a second, so if you asked a question in the last 2 minutes and it hasn't been answered, please re-ask it in the class.E-UNI channel. Or maybe someone can read it if I did miss anything. Alright, other questions? Any other questions going once? Any other questions going twice? Could be about anything. Doesn't have to be about wars. Could be about, I don't know what signature radius is. Could be about what's the difference between Tech 1 and Tech 2.
I have a question. Are we still at war? Are we still not allowed to fly our shiny?
The details of what ships you can and can't fly are covered in the war SOP. Let me link that.
The rules have been relaxed quite a bit lately, but you're not allowed to fly everything. Depends on what kind of role you have right now.
Yeah, so if you look at that link, the wartime standard operating procedures, you'll see that you can always fly T1, can always fly T2. Whether or not you can fly T3 depends on your titles, likewise with faction, pirate, unique, etc. So make sure you just take a look at that to decide what you can and can't fly.
Yeah,
basically,
thank you.
Don't fly things that are easy to kill, because the thing that someone asked before, how do we know how long the war will last? Apathy had a very good comment about the war will last less the more we deny them easy kills. The war will last longer the more we give them easy kills. So don't fly stupid things. Don't fly, a frigate with all of its slots devoted to mining instead of adventure or something like that. Make sure that you're flying an appropriate fit for your ship. If you can't fly a ship well, don't fly it at all. So if you can't fly, if you have a battleship but you can't fly it with large guns on, so you switch to medium guns, terrible idea. If you can't fly, a cruiser without a T2 tank, it's probably not a great idea either, etc., etc. Make sure you can fly a decent fit for the ship that you're sitting in.
There is guideline fits on Wiki per the size of the hull. Only experienced pilots should be able to manipulate those fits as such, like a battleship with double web scram and heavy pulse lasers, just to really mess up a frigate or something like that. But that's very rare cases. Highly recommend don't take in that particular hull in order to do that. But yes, only experienced pilots should recommend actually taking those hulls in retrospect and then refitting them to fit your needs.
And go ahead, sorry.
Does anybody want to talk about how you should fly those Blackbirds a little bit?
Apathy?
Well, the way I've fit them is I've put a micro warp drive on them. I've put one shield extender on them. I've put the 4 racial jammers on them. I've put a damage control on them, and then 2 ECM bonus low slot thingies that make your jammers work better. So what you do is, if you've just got one target you want to jam, as soon as you enter local, turn on the damage control, same as any ship. Look at the target you want to jam, turn all your jammers on. They're mid-slot modules, just like regular guns, but they're in your mid-slots. Turn them on, and that will jam the target. If there's multiple targets you want to jam, try to put the race of jammer with the race of ship they're flying. So if they're flying a Mauler, put an Amar jammer on them. If they're flying an Osprey, put a Kaldari jammer on them. Don't worry about your racial jammer not being right for that ship. It still might jam them. It's just that having the correct racial jammers might be a bit better. So in some cases, say the role of the ECM in the fleet is to jam out all the opposing Logi, and they have brought Augurs, which are Amar. The FC might ask you, Blackbirds, before you undock, switch to all Amar jammers. So you buy a bunch more Amar jammers, fill your mid-slots with Amar jammers, and you're done. That is basically how to Blackbird.
Yeah, also, one thing about Pothny, when you do use your jammers, if race it is, then use them as such, but don't use all your jammers at once. Don't literally do F1, F2, F3, F4, or control, whatever it is for the mid-slots, because you want to have them cycle in conjunction with each other to get a better shot. And of course, the Pothny is going to say something. Okay.
I've never actually flown a Blackbird. I'm a disgrace to having been E-UNI and never flown a Blackbird.
Oh my god. Get out of my channel, sir.
I was always FC. What can I do?
Oh, really? Just like that? Really?
Alright guys, hold on. Let's make sure we get through all the questions and then we can EP measure later on. Other questions? Did we miss anything? Other questions?
I have 2 questions actually.
Go for it.
One is, how do you graduate?
Okay, so you graduate by getting the graduate title. That's not very helpful, is it? So
not really.
So basically, this recently changed, but the way you progress through the uni used to be that there was this invisible number called the member index that measured how much you were participating. That's still there, but it's now irrelevant for purposes of titles. Instead, what you should do is go to the forum thread that describes how you should progress through the uni. It's all very clear there. Let me link that for you 1 second. So there's the forum thread, and then there is the wiki page associated with how you get your titles. You can, of course, leave the university at any time. You are in no way obligated to stay here at any time for your graduate title. The graduate title is just sort of a stamp of approval, I guess, that the uni thinks that you have completed enough requirements and you know your way around EVE to the point that you won't be totally bumbling and totally messing things up. I mean, I'm not even sure I should have the graduate title, but it's just sort of a rough measure of your progress in EVE.
You graduated my FCing course.
That would be good.
By which I mean the FCing course died a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, who do I ask about help when I want to add or edit an article in the wiki?
Like how do you edit? You just do it directly. You don't need to ask anyone to edit the wiki. There are some pages that are protected, like the campus pages, but generally speaking, for fitting and stuff, you can edit that yourself.
Yeah, what I was trying to do earlier was adding some new information about exploration and hacking and archaeology, and the hacking page redirected it to the lexicon. And well, I think I need some more advanced.
Do you have the? Were you logged in?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would go. There's a forum thread about. There's a forum rather in the forums that deals with the wiki. So that would be a good place to ask that kind of question.
All right.
Let me link that real quick. That is the forum thread. Whoever just asked that question about the wiki, that's the place you should go.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
So I've been mining up until this point, and I've got all my stuff in Aldrat, or in the back pocket of Aldrat. And I was wondering, in your experience, how often there's a fleet roaming and just various PvP activities during wartime, or should I have some other stuff to do in some downtime?
I think what you should do is figure out what you want to do in EVE, and then do that, and then just be more cautious about doing it when there are war targets about, as we described in this class. I don't think one should change. Being in a war situation should not change the process of using the university to discover what you would like to do while you're in EVE. So do whatever you think you would like to do, or what you might enjoy, and go do that, and just be more cautious about it, as we described in this class. Whether or not to answer your question about is it more likely that there'll be things to do in a fleet in the back pocket? That's hard for me to say. I don't know that people. To be honest, people don't generally. There have been, I would say, less PvE group activities than I'd like to see lately. But that doesn't mean you can't go ahead and start your own. White-Told Grits asked, are planned fleets rescheduled, then war announced, or they stay on as planned? Yes. White-Told fleets continue to go on as planned. Again, a war deck shouldn't be considered particularly disruptive to everything else you want to do. If anything, it's more of an opportunity, especially PvP fleets, to go kill those things.
Like my Amar fleet tomorrow, hint hint.
Like that one, you shameless whore.
Oh, I'll be there.
You know me.
Is there an Amar ship that would be good for E-War?
The Crucifier.
Or the Arbitrator.
Yes.
Or the Dragoon, in some sense.
So again, I'll just mention the forum thread one more time. So if you have other feedback you'd like to give about the class, please put it in the forum thread. All right, other questions going once? Questions going twice? I thought I saw someone whose name started with a C. Their mic was hot a little while ago, and I think they got interrupted by someone else. Is it like Corvin or Chenji Katana?
Yeah, that was me. It was for the question about the Amar E-War ships.
Oh, okay, great.
This is actually not really related to the class. It's more about standings.
100% fine.
Trying to repair standings with Caldari and Amar. And I'm running level 1 missions, but I keep getting ones that are against Mimitar and Galente. I mean, is it worthwhile to just take those and take the small hit and get up to higher missions?
No, don't. Try to avoid those if you can. When you say against Mimitar, you mean literally against Mimitar ships, right? Not against the Sancha or anything like that.
Right. Literally against Mimitar.
Yeah, don't take those missions if you are trying to do it. The quickest way, honestly, to repair faction standing is to do the Sisters of Eve arc, which takes maybe a few hours. Have you already done that?
Yeah, I did that a while ago.
Has it been more than 3 months since you did it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Then you can do it again.
I didn't know I could. Well, I'll do that then. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, that'll give you a very large boost. Also, Skip mentions the fact that you can use skills to boost your standings. When you say you're trying to repair them, what are you trying to get them to?
More than negative.
I mean, are you trying to do it for some particular reason? Like you want the standings to anchor a pause or something? What are you trying to do?
No, just I had to get diplomacy so that I wouldn't be attacked when I went into their space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, character's a couple years old. All I did was missions for a long time. So
I see.
All Mimitar missions, and I didn't really pay attention to standings. So, I mean, even with diplomacy 4, I'm at -4, or no, sorry, -3 for Amar and 2.5 for Kaldari.
Ooh, okay, yeah. If you you only need to get them above -2 to avoid getting shot at by the faction police.
Yeah, and it's going to be kind of hard to do the Sisters of Eve arc if you're getting shot at.
Can I suggest level 1 delivery missions if you're restricted to level 1, because they don't normally go against another faction?
That is true, yes. Delivery missions would be a good choice.
And they're generally definitely quicker too.
All right, thanks.
Or if you've got an alt that's got good standings with them, you can share the standing increase.
Or if someone's running a mission, you can ask a spider mission, or spider fleet.
The biggest gain in standing, though, is always done through the storyline. So if you just run through 14 delivery missions really quickly, you can get the storyline straight away.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other way is, I think they made it a while ago that you can actually start the missions for the other factions that you're negative to. If you keep an eye on your status and have a look, I posted a thing in the PvE section about Cosmos missions. There's an HB3 site. You can actually buy tags and go and hand them in to the agents, and you get direct faction standing gain for those instead of doing the missions and then the missions you get every 5 or 6 that give you faction standing as opposed to corporation standing. And that would help you straight away.
Yep. It's a good thought, thank you. Alright, it's been about 105 minutes since we started the class. So, any other questions? Going once? Going twice? And sold. Alright, thanks everyone. I appreciate the class. Please comment on the forum thread. I linked it one more time. I would very much appreciate your thoughts, even if that thought is, I like it, or I don't like it, and here's why. I would just love to hear what could be improved about the class, what you liked about the class, what you didn't like about the class. So thanks very much for your time, and I look forward to blowing things up with you guys starting tomorrow at 0625. The war begins. Alright, have a good one.